welcome to the debrief for the WEC 6 Hours of Fuji 2023. And what a race, what a day. And talk me through the big headlines from today's race.
Well, I mean, the big headline, I guess, is Toyota win in Japan at Fuji. They got the job done. This is what they wanted. Great race in LMP2. We saw United lead the way initially. They had a strong qualifying, led the race from pole, and then WRT came to the fore. And so a great battle right through to the end of that race with those two. We'll get to that later, no doubt. GT, full of penalties, mainly Corvette.
Yep.
But
very chaotic actually there, wasn't it?
It was very chaotic, but yeah, they're really the headlines of today, and in many ways a bit of a surprise winner in GT. Yeah, it was the usual protagonists up to that point.
Well, how about we delve into those headlines a little bit more? Let's start with Toyota, because we have our teams, our manufacturers champions for the year, I should say. With that 1-2, they have claimed the crown, and honestly, for the first 4 hours, I was a bit worried, and then all of a sudden it was the Toyota we know and love here in Fuji.
I mean, once again, you see a 1-2 from Toyota and you think, yeah, of course, it's Toyota, they always win. It sounds like a boring race. Well, it's far from it. They had serious pressure today from Porsche.
Which is brilliant.
Knew? I didn't coming into this race.
So
You're going to see that.
exciting.
Really exciting. Porsche really took the fight to them, down into turn one. Laurent Fantor sent it down
Beautiful.
the inside. Great move, and it's such an important move, because Conway gave him room in the end, and then he was never headed for a long time, way over halfway into the race. He took that Porsche, Kevin Estre took to the wheel.
That was a really good fight too.
And he kept those Toyotas at bay. They both closed down on him and the elbows were properly out. It was some really precise, brilliant driving from all three. You had Estre at one point with Lopez trying to get past, and then Hirakawa, local boy, joined the fight. It was absolutely brilliant. Of course, eventually they found their way by and then sailed off into the distance, but it really wasn't easy. They only won by 47 seconds over Porsche in a trouble-free race with hardly any safety cars, or well, you had one very short period of safety car at the very beginning, and then a very tiny full course yellow. Hardly lasted any time at all. So in a trouble-free race, with a Porsche finishing within 50 seconds
Brilliant.
of Toyota, it's absolutely amazing. By far, Porsche's best race. Well executed. The three drivers did a brilliant job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it up until about an hour to go, where Toyota were just, you knew they were going to win, but far from what the initial headline story would suggest.
Well, let's chat about Ferrari, because up until now, the whole narrative of the season has kind of become Toyota versus the prancing horse. And suddenly they just weren't quite there today. What was going on with that team, do you think?
I think they were a little bit too hard on their tyres. They had to go onto the hard tyre when many others could run the mediums. Most of the Porsches could run the medium tyres. And the Toyota even went to them eventually after the second or third round of pit stops. But Ferrari were just committed to the hard tyre. So they were really starting to struggle more towards the end of their stints, and they seemed to have the pace on the straights. That's not where they were losing their speed, but it really seemed to be just in the higher speed corners where the others could really make a lot of lap time on them. And
Cadillac, the Porsche customer teams, Van Wall, where are the other stories from our hypercars today?
Well, Peugeot weren't really in it either. I was expecting them to be slightly higher up. They had a pretty decent race in Monza, but a very different track to here in Fuji. This has got a lot more tighter corners and higher speed corners as well. First sector, second sector, full of, you've got the tighter corner at turn one, and then lots of fast flowing corners where it does a lot of damage to the tyre, lots of heat build up, a very different surface of the track as well, of course. But that final sector where it's all about point and squirt and wrestle with the car, you really saw teams like Peugeot fighting a bit more to keep the car under control than the likes of Toyota and Porsche, surprisingly, today.
And Cadillac, the bad luck streak continues. What's it going to take to get them there?
Well, they've had some decent races. Le Mans was actually a very strong race for Cadillac. Monza not so much, but it was certainly better than here. They were really they were behind Ferrari today, and actually would have been behind the Proton and Jota, even without their troubles with that strange situation where they lost a front wheel.
It was quite wild, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was well into their stint, so it wasn't like it happened during a pit stop, but
Yeah.
we'll get to the bottom of that in time, I'm sure, but I've never seen that happen more than halfway through the race for them.
And let's move on to LMP2 then, because a year on from where WRT took the win here last year, this time it was the number 41 with Kubica, Rui Andrade and Louis Delatraz that took home the win. I honestly, going into it, didn't kind of expect that. United looked so strong in qualifying. What gave them the edge in the end, do you think?
Well, like I said, this track's quite strange and that we had very changeable weather conditions the whole way through this weekend. So I think I couldn't read too much into qualifying because sometimes the attribute your car has in qualifying doesn't necessarily lend itself very well for preserving its tyres for the race. And I feel like that's really where WRT got it right today. The drivers did a cracking job, especially Louis Delatraz. For me, he was driver of the race in LMP2. He really sent that car 41 right to the front, and his teammates just sort of ran with it as well. So that's really where that performance gain came from Louis, the job he did. But the car definitely showed good strengths in looking after its tyres on a circuit that's renowned for being brutal on them. And they'd clearly set their car up more towards that direction than qualifying. And maybe Hansen, I think in qualifying, getting pole position, he just drove a brilliant lap, which you can do for one lap, and jump the competition, and it makes it look like, oh, United have got the car to do it this weekend. But I think in LMP2, particularly around this circuit, you've always got to take that with a pinch of salt, and also understand that this circuit can change so much as well throughout the race, and therefore the balance you had at the start may not necessarily be there towards the end for you.
I do want to bring up, of course, the number 31, because after a tough run of races for that car, it's really, really nice to see them on the podium. But the other talking point, I think, actually comes from the championship, because coming into this weekend, it was really pretty still tight between Inter Europol and WRT. But today, Inter Europol just didn't have the pace, weren't quite there.
All week.
What was going on?
Where were they? All week. I haven't seen any speed from Inter Europol at all.
Yeah.
So I'm really surprised by that. The car just looked like it wasn't attached to the surface of the track in any way, moving around all the time. On top of that, they had a few issues as well. It was a very scruffy weekend by their standards anyway this weekend. So not up there at all. They slipped back in the championship.
Tough.
And now it looks like it's car 41 just going to ease it through
Theirs to
in Bahrain.
lose.
Yeah, it's theirs to lose. They literally have to have a DNF and their closest competition win the race in Bahrain, because it's the not double points, but it's points and a half, isn't it, in Bahrain? So I think they're in such a strong position, but anything can happen.
Anything can happen, and probably will. We know what WEC's like.
Yeah, exactly, especially LMP2.
Of course. Let's finish up with LMG. Ooh.
Before we finish that, what a fight it was between car 31. I thought that's why you brought up 31.
Oh!
What a fight it was.
That at the end of the race.
Robin Freins and Philippe Albuquerque.
Beautiful
two
stuff.
Stalwarts of LMP2, some of the toughest competitors you'll
I
ever
was
come
sat
across.
there like
two rutting stags towards the end of the race.
So
they were
good.
not going to give an inch, not even, forget an inch, a millimetre. They even came to blows down in towards turn 10.
Brilliant.
And then right at the end, the cameras didn't pick it up. The positions got inverted again, with Felipe beating that car 31 of Freins to the flag. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Some of the best LMP2 racing you're ever likely to watch.
So much fun. So much fun. Right, thank you for bringing that one up, because that, very good point. Let's finish up with LMGTE Am, because it was a scrappy race there. It was quite hard to read it, really hard to understand what was going on. But the number 54 came out on top for the first time this season. How did they do it from what you could sort of make out?
Yeah, I mean, look, they had a few issues at the start of the race. It didn't really look like it was going to go their way. It boiled down to, once again, the Sarah Bovey, Ben Keating show and the Iron Dames. And the Corvette, it had the speed to win today, hands down. That's why they've already won the championship.
Yep.
They've been the class of the field all year. But today they ran into problems. They had lots of penalties. They had contact with other cars, pit lane infringements as well.
Yeah.
So they lost 30 seconds through penalties in this race
They
today.
were a lap down at one point, weren't they?
Because it was the way it was.
Everything
out of
went.
sequence,
Yeah.
But it boiled down to them losing the race by 22 seconds.
Crazy.
So without the penalties,
Yep.
should have won. So, you know, it goes to show once again they had the speed, but they didn't put together a faultless race, and that's what you need to do, no matter what category you're racing in, no matter what speed advantage you have over the competition. It's too close these days to allow yourself any kind of penalties. So didn't have a clean race, and they ended up finishing third. Doesn't really matter because the championship's done for them. It's
Championship, tick box.
Exactly. They're just here to have fun now and try and win as many races as possible through to the end of the year. But yeah, I was surprised that we saw such a change of positions up and down the grid after those two. So hard to read, and you know, every time I looked or took my attention away from the P2 scrap or the hypercar battles out in front, every time I looked down at the GT order, there's someone different in the lead and second and third. It was constantly.
And how many pit stops do they need to make still? And
exactly.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a bit confusing to follow their race, and many penalties were given. But at the end, it was Thomas Floor and his car crew that did the business. And I'm really pleased for them, actually. They've been knocking on the door for a win for a long time. And yeah, rightly rewarded here. Because they did put together you know, enough of a faultless race that I don't think anyone had the complete perfect racing GT. But they did the best out of anyone in terms of driving time, driver, car crew combination. Castellacci as well, I thought, drove well, and Davide Rigon, you know, he's a pro driver, so you'd always expect him to whenever he's in the car to perform, you know, to deliver quick lap times and to perform at a very high level. So, yeah, great for them to win here in Fuji.
Right, it's that time. You know what I'm going to ask you?
Oh no!
I need your driver of the day. Hit me with it. Hit me with it. I
mean, as much as I enjoyed the LMP2 battle, I think you have to look at the front of Hypercar, and it was a really intense fight. I mentioned that move down into turn one from Laurent Vantor. I'm narrowly going to give it to him today because that stint, the opening stints he did in the race, it was phenomenal. He didn't expect it. He drove out of his skin really to get that car into a pretty commanding position, stretched away from the two Ferraris. Yes, the Toyotas were stuck behind the Ferraris, but he created that situation for Porsche today. You know, they could have won with just a few little hiccups from Toyota. They didn't, they were faultless, but a few little hiccups and they could have won, and it would have mostly been down to him. I know Estra got his elbows out and did some brilliant defensive driving, but Vantor was matching the Toyota's speed pretty much in clear air, and I didn't see any of the other Porsche drivers manage to do that. So for me, I would give the driver of the day out of all categories. I'd give it to him.
I am really glad you said that because I was in the Porsche garage when he got out of the car after that stint, and there was two things that really struck me. One was how much it meant to that team that every mechanic was coming over to give him a handshake, give him a pat on the back. His teammates were there. Yeah. It really, after a tough start to the season, that meant a lot. But also,
I feel like they came of age today. Yeah. You know, it's not easy to jump into this series and try and take the fight to Toyota straight away. I know Ferrari won Le Mans, that was brilliant. Maybe Ferrari just created their car for that one track, and you know, who can blame them?
Fair play to them.
And it hasn't worked everywhere else. But this really was, like I said, by far Porsche's best race for the Car 6. I know Car 5 had troubles unfairly. You know, what happened to them in turn one with the contact, it really wasn't their fault at all. And then they limped home with a puncture to change that. They had to come into the pits and then get a penalty because they've come into a closed pit lane. That's the Toyota team you can hear under us.
Having their celebrations, deservedly so. Just
rubbing it into the competition.
Yeah, why not?
Just a little bit more. But Porsche, they created that. They were the race today. Yeah. Porsche created the race, and without them, it would have been an easy Toyota 1-2. And with the troubles that Brendan Hartley was having in the car number 8, then it would have just been Car 7 would have just absolutely romped home to victory with zero competition, but that was far from the actual story.
Thank you so much for watching. That's the penultimate race of the season done. We've got one round left where our champions will be decided. That is one you do not want to miss. We will see you in Bahrain in a few weeks' time.